Hi there, welcome to Don's Workshop. This is part 6 of my Lamborghini Countach build. So last time, got these doors on, the scissor doors they seem to be, but we'll see once we get it more built. Anyway, now we're going to continue. It looks like I got everything sorted here, so let's get started. Here's the car, and I need to just start on with one of these parts. And today, I wanted to talk about hallucinations a bit more in LLMs, or with the tools that are being used by LLMs to come up with some of these responses. Now, this hallucination idea came up pretty early on with when some of these tools were first made available to everybody, widely available to everybody to use, like Copilot, ChatGPT. When people really started giving them a try, the first thing they did was they found these hallucinations. And they were usually the result of just too many questions in a row, and then it just was running out of context space. We know that now, but at the time, people really didn't understand that's what the problem was. Or at the time, people didn't really understand what the problem was, so they were like, oh, it doesn't know what it's doing. It's like, these are, you can't trust anything it produces type thing. So that's where that attitude about LLMs is kind of stuck around. There's still a lot of people that are still sticking to this idea that they're the same as they were 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, when they were having this hallucination problem. Now we know what the hallucination problem is. They have seriously, the improvements on how can handle large amounts of context now, much larger than they used to, that they can take entire code bases. In the case of I believe Gemini has a very large number of tokens it can take as input that allows it to really give really good answers because it has a lot of data to refer to. But early on, people didn't know this is what was happening. This is where you would start asking questions and it would start giving you nonsense answers because it was losing track of what the original question was. It was no longer within the context space of what it was answering. So it just started giving nonsense answers. No longer knew the question. And Microsoft introduced that limit. They started saying, hey, it's limited to 1,000 tokens, I think. And then they would say you have to start over because they just forced you to start over. This was just last year, I think. Early last year when they were really starting to push this out, right? And yeah, you were limited. You couldn't ask so much because they wanted you to not overload it. And they were more worried about the hallucinations than they were about, just letting it flow, I guess. Now that has, of course, gone to the wayside now that we know what the hallucinations kind of were caused by, just the lack of space to refer to the context of the question. So what as you see with a lot of the new agents and even with the questions, they will go back, they will run out of space. And knowing that they have run out of space, they will go reanalyze like the question. They will go back and look again, essentially, at what the original question was. They would go back and they'll go back and they will kind of reanalyze everything and continue always rebuilding when they run out of space, right? So in that way, they become better at answering the questions. Now, they still lose track if you give it way too much information. I've experienced this many times. Once you get too much information in there, it will start doing stuff that you are not expecting it to do, or you will see its answers just become not useful. It'll start solving the wrong problem, is essentially what it's doing. It no longer knows what the problem is. So, that's pretty cool. The actual hallucination problem has been alleviated to quite an extent. But it was also, along with the hallucination problem, is the accuracy problem. The hallucination problem is often part of just not having enough space to remember or to have the right question that it was answering during the entire context of the questioning. And then there's just the inaccurate data problem. I think the most famous one of those problems is the 3 R's in strawberry problem. How many R's in strawberry? There's 2. No, there's 3 R's in strawberry. But it could just keep getting that wrong. Now, a lot of them were getting that wrong, which was kind of funny. And that's because, as I've mentioned before, is that a lot of these LLMs, they're based on the same data. The data from the internet, the data from books, any digitized data that they were able to get a hold of before it got put behind paywalls or whatever people could do to try to protect some of their intellectual property. They could all answer that 3 R's or the how many R's in strawberry question wrong, until of course it was fixed by, probably not by fixing the actual data within the LLM. It was probably fixed by, like, if somebody asked 3 R's in strawberry, say there, or how many R's in strawberry, just say 3 as a response extraneous to the actual what's in the model, because changing what's in the model is quite difficult. You really have to rerun all the I think you have to rerun everything, because otherwise the percentages that get put into the probabilities for what tokens come next will get skewed too much if you try to play around with stuff directly within the model. And I believe we've seen that effect when they try to play around too much directly with stuff in the model. Whatever, white repression within South Africa, which was nonsense, but he tried to put that into Grok, and it completely overruled like sensible things. And then you would ask Grok, and Grok's like, yeah, that's not right. It was completely ridiculous. And it's like, you can't play with the model directly because it just breaks too much. And part of the reason it breaks too much is those probabilities are so tightly related to, like, between all the tokens that are within a model, that when you do something like that, it's too much. It's not, there's no subtlety in doing that. If you were to make a change that was I don't even know how small a change you would have to make it not completely obvious you were making the change. I'm sure there are researchers trying to figure that out as we speak, but I don't know what that would be. But I still think it would just be really hard because of the nature of the data that's in these models. It has been very much vetted over years of research, writing and editing, like all this information is too highly related and truthful, I guess, is a word I could use. It's very truthful information that it makes it hard to untruthify it. There's just not, people who write don't tend to write lies when it comes to science, when it comes to research, when it comes to anything like that. They're not usually trying to write lies. It's rare. It's not unheard of, but usually writing lies is referred to as fiction. So okay, trying to get that. Oh, these are off just a little bit. So the LP in Countach name stands for longitudinal posterior, rear longitudinal in English, as that is the position of the engine. Oh, okay. It's a rear engine. Okay, gotta pop that in there. Is that gonna fit nicely? Okay, we've got that, and blocking it. Can I get that there? There we go. That is a neat little engine build. Oh, yeah. One of the things that was very interesting, I watched a talk by Scott Hanselman where he was demonstrating how the model comes up with the answers it comes up with. The probabilities of what the next word is going to be, or next words. And that showed something like that was very interesting, is that one of the things about these models is that they're non-deterministic. That just means that it doesn't always take the highest percentage. It's just going to take the highest percentage more often than the other ones, but it is not always going to take the highest percentage. Otherwise, if it did, it would always answer a question, the same way, and we know they do not do that. If you ask two models the same question, they may come up with similar answers, but they will not be exactly the same. So this little application he built showed like the percentages, and what was really interesting is that if the model happens to pick a low percentage word early on in the answer, that would make it more likely that the rest of the answer is going to be poor or considered a hallucination. So that was an interesting bit about that demonstration, is that a model could end up being, is that supposed to go on that thing? A model could end up answering poorly only because one of the words it picked for its answer early on was just bad. And this comes into why a lot of times it's easier to just tell it to redo the answer than it is to have it try to continue to explain the answer it has. Anyway, that's a little bit about just the hallucinations on models, and I am done the engine of the Lamborghini here. So that is looking pretty good. We're getting more on there. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and take it easy.